Well, hell, I'm dead if I can find anything wrong with it.
No 9,000 computer has ever made a mistake or
2001. A Space Odyssey didn't follow the rules. It barely had dialogue, the ending made no sense. And the director, he refused to explain any of it. These are 20 weird facts about 2001, A Space Odyssey. And the bonus, let's just say the studio wanted Kubrick to add narration because audiences were walking out confused. Strap in. This journey goes beyond the infinite. Number 1. Stanley Kubrick didn't want to make just another sci-fi movie. He wanted to make something that felt real, that looked like the future actually would. So, he did something almost unheard of in 1960s Hollywood. He hired real scientists, not consultants who'd show up for a day and sign off. Real astrophysicists, aerospace engineers, designers from NASA and IBM. They didn't just advise, they rebuilt the entire script. Arthur C. Clarke's story had faster-than-light travel, alien cities, traditional space opera elements. The scientists said no. That's not how it works. So, Kubrick and Clarke rewrote everything. They grounded it in physics, in orbital mechanics, in the actual technology NASA was developing for the Apollo program. The spacesuits weren't costumes. They were based on real prototypes. The instrument panels weren't props. They were designed by the same people building mission control. Even the food that the astronauts ate, those colored paste squares, those came from actual space program research. It added months to pre-production. It tripled the research budget. But when 2001 hit theaters, NASA engineers sat in the audience and saw their work. Not a fantasy version, the real thing. And that's why, 50 years later, it still doesn't look dated. Because Kubrick didn't guess at the future. He built it with the people who were already living there. Number 2. The centrifuge wasn't just the most impressive set in the film. It was the most expensive, most dangerous, and most innovative piece of film technology ever built at that time. A real working Ferris wheel turned on its side, 38 feet in diameter, built by Vickers Armstrong Engineering at a cost of $750,000. That's over $7 million today, and it actually rotated. The camera was mounted inside, bolted to the floor, while the entire set spun around it at 3 miles per hour. When Gary Lockwood ran along the curved floor, he wasn't acting against a green screen. He was actually running inside a rotating drum while the camera turned with him, creating the illusion of artificial gravity. But it wasn't safe. The set was so heavy that if it malfunctioned, it could have crushed anyone inside. Crew members had to be strapped in during shoots. Kubrick himself rarely went inside, directing from monitors outside. And the actors, they trained for weeks just to move correctly, to time their steps with the rotation, to avoid stumbling and breaking bones against the unforgiving metal walls. Some shots took 50 takes, not because the acting was wrong, but because the physics were impossible to predict. A light would shift, a shadow would fall wrong, a piece of tape would peel off mid-rotation, and Kubrick would stop everything, reset, and start again. That centrifuge became a prison, a marvel, and a symbol of Kubrick's obsession all at once. 015 to 018.
Full name.
Moon, American, Floyd.
Number 3. For the first 25 minutes of the film, there's almost no dialogue, just apes, grunting, fighting, discovering. And those apes, they weren't CGI or puppets or men in cheap rubber suits. They were choreographed performances directed with the precision of ballet. Kubrick hired mime artist Dan Richter to play the lead ape, Moonwatcher. And Richter didn't just put on a costume and act wild. He studied real primates for months. He watched hours of documentary footage. He visited zoos, observing how apes moved, how they gestured, how they established dominance. Then he trained the other actors, teaching them to move as a troupe, to communicate without words, to build a physical language that felt ancient and real. The suits themselves were custom designed, built from lightweight foam and fur, with articulated faces that could show emotion. But they were hot, suffocating, nearly impossible to see through. Actors passed out inside them. Some quit after a few days. The African desert location made it worse. Baking heat, blinding sun, no air conditioning. Richter would stay in character for hours, refusing to break, living as the ape even between takes. And Kubrick pushed him harder, demanding more takes, more authenticity, more transformation. What you see on screen isn't men pretending to be apes. It's performers who temporarily became something else. And that opening sequence, often called boring or slow by critics, It's actually one of the most physically demanding pieces of performance art ever captured on film. Number 4. HAL 9000 has one of the most iconic voices in cinema history. Calm, polite, terrifying. But that voice almost never happened. Originally, Kubrick cast actor Martin Balsam to voice the AI. Balsam recorded all of HAL's lines, spent weeks in post-production, delivered everything Kubrick asked for, and then Kubrick fired him. Not because Balsam did anything wrong, because he sounded too human, too emotional, too American. Kubrick wanted HAL to feel emotionless, almost alien, unsettlingly neutral. So, with the film nearly finished, he started auditioning again. And he found Douglas Rain, a Canadian Shakespearean actor with a voice that felt like ice, precise, controlled, devoid of warmth. Rain recorded HAL's entire part in just 2.5 days. He never met the cast, never visited the set. He stood alone in a recording booth in London, reading lines into a microphone, with no context for the scenes, no idea how his voice would be used. Kubrick gave him almost no direction, just flatter, colder, again. And Rain delivered. That monotone politeness, that chilling disconnect between HAL's words and actions, it came from an actor who approached the role like he was reading a technical manual. No performance, just information. And somehow, that absence of emotion became the most terrifying performance in the film. Because HAL doesn't sound evil, he sounds reasonable, and that's what makes him unforgettable. 127 to 130. Number 5. Stanley Kubrick was obsessed with perfection, but even by his standards, 2001 pushed the limits of sanity. Some scenes took over 100 takes. Not because of technical problems, not because actors forgot lines, because Kubrick saw imperfections no one else could see. A reflection in a helmet visor, a shadow that fell half an inch wrong, a piece of dust on the lens that wouldn't show up on a theater screen, but bothered him anyway. He'd stop production for hours, sometimes entire days, to fix things that didn't matter to anyone but him. The actors suffered most. Keir Dullea, who played Dave Bowman, said he'd deliver a line perfectly, hit every mark, nail the emotion, and Kubrick would say, again. No explanation, just again. Over and over until Dullea couldn't remember why he'd said it that way in the first place. The crew nicknamed Kubrick the perfectionist dictator. Some loved him for it, others quietly hated him, but no one quit. Because even in the middle of the madness, even during the endless retakes and the brutal schedules, they knew they were making something no one had ever seen before. Kubrick didn't just want a good film, he wanted a perfect one, and he was willing to destroy everyone around him to get it. The result was a movie that took 4 years to make, cost $10.5 million, nearly bankrupted MGM, and still looks flawless decades later. Because Kubrick didn't compromise, ever. And that uncompromising vision, it's in every frame. Number 6. The monolith is the most mysterious object in film history. A simple black rectangle, perfectly smooth, impossibly precise. But creating it nearly broke the effects team. The original plan was to use a transparent lucite slab, but it reflected everything: the cameras, the lights, the crew. So they tried painting it black. The paint looked cheap. They tried covering it in velvet. The texture showed. They tried polishing graphite. It cracked under the lights. Finally, they settled on a 12-foot-tall slab of wood, coated in black paint, polished obsessively until it reflected nothing and everything at once. But filming it was worse. Every shot required perfect lighting. Too much and it glowed. Too little and it disappeared. The camera crew spent days positioning lights at exact angles, measuring distances down to the millimeter. And Kubrick, he'd watch the dailies and say, again, it's not right. The monolith appears in 4 scenes. Each one took weeks to shoot, because Kubrick wanted it to feel impossible, like it didn't belong in our reality, like it was something beyond human understanding. And he succeeded. To this day, no one can agree what the monolith is, what it means, why it's there. Kubrick never explained it. Clark gave vague answers that contradicted each other. The actors didn't know. The crew didn't know. It was just there, perfect, unexplainable, driving everyone insane trying to film it. And maybe that was the point, because the monolith isn't just a prop, it's a question. And Kubrick made sure no one would ever answer it. 103 to 105.
Monolith has remained completely inert.
Number 7. The famous bone-to-satellite cut, where a prehistoric ape throws a bone into the air and it transforms into a spaceship 4 million years later, is often called the greatest match cut in cinema. One frame, one edit, spanning all of human history. But that cut almost didn't happen. Originally, Kubrick planned a 10-minute montage showing human evolution. Cave paintings, early civilizations, the development of tools, agriculture, cities, finally leading to space travel. He storyboarded the entire sequence. He hired researchers to design historically accurate sets. He even filmed parts of it, spending weeks on elaborate reconstructions of human progress. And then he watched it, and he hated it. It was too literal, too obvious, too much like a documentary. It explained everything, and Kubrick didn't want explanations. He wanted audiences to feel the leap, not understand it. So he cut it all. 10 minutes of footage, months of work, hundreds of thousands of dollars, gone. Replaced with a single edit. A bone becomes a weapon becomes a satellite. And in that instant, Kubrick communicated something no montage ever could. That violence and progress are the same impulse, that the tool and the weapon are identical, that humanity hasn't evolved, we've just built better bones. The studio executives were furious. They demanded he restore the montage, said audiences wouldn't understand the jump. Kubrick refused, and that refusal, that one bold cut, changed how filmmakers thought about editing forever. Because sometimes the most powerful story is the one you don't tell. Number 8. When 2001 premiered in April 1968, it was a disaster. Critics hated it. Audiences walked out. Some people left after 15 minutes, others made it to intermission and never came back. At the New York premiere, over 200 people walked out, including Rock Hudson, who reportedly said, "Will someone tell me what the hell this is about?" The reviews were brutal. Variety called it uncompromising and weird. Renata Adler of the New York Times said it was somewhere between hypnotic and immensely boring. Even Arthur C. Clarke was nervous, watching his co-creation get destroyed by critics who expected a traditional science fiction adventure and got a slow, meditative art film instead. MGM panicked. They'd invested millions. They'd promoted it as the ultimate sci-fi spectacular, and now people were demanding refunds. The studio called Kubrick. They wanted changes. They wanted him to cut the slow parts, add narration, maybe put in some explanatory dialogue. Kubrick said no. He didn't defend the film. He didn't explain his choices. He just waited, because he knew something the studio didn't. That the people who stayed, the ones who watched until the end, they were talking about it. And that talk spread. Word of mouth built. Within weeks, the walkouts stopped. Audiences came back for second viewings. College students made it a midnight movie. And by summer, 2001 had become the counterculture event of the year. The film that confused everyone became the film everyone had to see, because Kubrick never compromised, and eventually the world caught up. Number 9. The Stargate sequence, that psychedelic 14-minute trip through light, color, and impossible landscapes, is one of the most talked about sequences in film history, but creating it nearly killed the effects team. Douglas Trumbull, the special effects supervisor, invented entirely new filming techniques just for that scene. Slit-scan photography, where light is streaked across film in controlled patterns to create the illusion of motion through space. It had never been done before. There were no instructions, no manuals, no existing technology. Trumbull built the equipment himself in a warehouse, using custom lenses, motorized rigs, and hundreds of thousands of feet of film. Each frame took hours to expose. A single second of footage could take a full day to create. The sequence required over 200 separate elements, each one filmed individually, then painstakingly composited together in camera because digital compositing didn't exist yet. Trumbull and his team worked 18-hour days for months. Some of them had mental breakdowns. Others quit from exhaustion. And Kubrick, he kept demanding more. Make it stranger. Make it more intense. I want people to feel like they're dying. At one point, Trumbull told Kubrick it was impossible, that the equipment couldn't handle what he wanted. Kubrick just stared at him and said, "Then build better equipment." So, Trumbull did. He pushed the technology past its limits, creating visual effects that wouldn't be matched for decades. And when it was finished, when audiences finally saw that sequence on a giant screen, some of them had panic attacks, others cried. Many left confused, but no one forgot it. Because Trumbull didn't just make special effects, he made something genuinely alien. 1:57 to 2 o'clock. Number 10. The film's ending, where astronaut Dave Bowman ages rapidly in a mysterious white room before transforming into the Star Child, baffled everyone. Audiences demanded explanations. Critics wrote essays trying to decode it, and Kubrick, he refused to say a word. He gave no interviews explaining the finale. He offered no official interpretation. When pressed, he'd say, "It's whatever you think it is," and walk away. Even the cast didn't know what it meant. Keir Dullea asked Kubrick multiple times during filming, "What's happening to my character? What is this room? What am I becoming?" Kubrick would just smile and say, "Don't worry about it. Just play the moment." The studio went insane. They wanted answers to put in press materials, to help market the film, to guide audience understanding. Kubrick refused every request. Arthur C. Clarke tried to offer explanations in interviews, talking about advanced alien intelligence and transcendence. But his answers contradicted Kubrick's vision, and Kubrick never confirmed them. The ambiguity was intentional. Kubrick wanted to create a film that worked like music, that communicated through image and sound rather than narrative logic. And he succeeded so completely that people are still arguing about the ending 50 years later. Some see rebirth, others see death. Some see evolution, others see insanity. And Kubrick, from beyond the grave, he's still not telling. Because the mystery isn't a flaw, it's the entire point. And in refusing to explain, Kubrick created cinema's greatest question mark. 2:05 to 2:08. Number 11. The film's iconic score, featuring Also Sprach Zarathustra and The Blue Danube, wasn't supposed to be in the movie at all. Kubrick had commissioned an original score from composer Alex North, who spent months writing a full orchestral soundtrack. North composed over 40 minutes of music, recorded it with a full orchestra, and delivered what he thought was exactly what Kubrick wanted. He even attended the premiere, excited to hear his work on the big screen. But when the film started, his music wasn't there. Kubrick had used the temp track, the classical pieces he'd edited with during post-production, and never told North he'd been replaced. North sat through the entire film in shock, watching his months of work erased without warning. He never forgave Kubrick, but the decision was brilliant. The classical music gave the film a timeless quality, a sense of grandeur that an original score couldn't match. Also, Sprach Zarathustra became synonymous with space, with evolution, with cosmic mystery. And The Blue Danube transformed a routine docking sequence into a ballet. Kubrick's ruthlessness crushed a composer, but it created one of the most recognizable soundtracks in film history. Number 12. The food that the astronauts eat on the Discovery, those colorful paste squares labeled with different meals, they were real. Kubrick didn't want prop food that looked fake under the lights. So, he contacted food scientists developing nutrition for actual space missions and had them create prototype meals. The actors had to eat them on camera, and they were disgusting. Gelatinous, flavorless, with textures that ranged from slimy to cardboard. Gary Lockwood and Keir Dullea complained constantly. Between takes, they'd spit the food into buckets and rinse their mouths with water. But Kubrick made them keep eating it, take after take, because he wanted their reactions to be genuine. He wanted audiences to see the reality of space travel, the small indignities, the loss of pleasure. And it worked. When you watch those scenes, the astronauts' discomfort is real. They're not acting. They're actually eating terrible food and trying to pretend it's normal. It's a tiny detail, something most viewers never think about. But it's another example of Kubrick's obsession with authenticity, his refusal to fake anything, even something as simple as a meal. Number 13. During filming, Kubrick became convinced that extraterrestrial life would be discovered before the film was released. He was so worried about it that he actually tried to take out insurance. He contacted Lloyd's of London and asked if they could insure the film against the possibility that aliens would be found, rendering his science fiction obsolete. Lloyd's thought he was joking. He wasn't. Kubrick was genuinely concerned that NASA or Soviet scientists would announce contact, that his carefully crafted alien mystery would become irrelevant overnight. The insurance company eventually declined, saying the risk was impossible to calculate. But Kubrick's paranoia didn't stop. He followed space news obsessively, monitored radio telescopes, even contacted SETI researchers to ask about their latest findings. His fear was so intense that when the film finally premiered and no aliens had been discovered, he was visibly relieved. It's one of the strangest anxieties in film history. Most directors worry about box office, about reviews, about technical problems. Kubrick worried that reality would upstage his fiction. And in a weird way, that paranoia shows how seriously he took the film, how much he believed in its vision of the cosmos. Number 14. The space station scenes required perfect silence. The vacuum of space translated to screen. But achieving that silence was nearly impossible. Film sets are loud, equipment hums, crew members whisper, air conditioning runs. Kubrick demanded absolute quiet during those shots, and he got it by terrorizing his crew. Anyone who made noise was immediately removed from set. He installed red lights that would flash if sound levels rose above a whisper. He hired sound technicians whose only job was to monitor ambient noise and identify sources. Crew members learned to communicate through hand signals. They wore soft-soled shoes. They moved like ghosts. And still, Kubrick would hear something, a breath, a shuffle, and stop everything. The pressure was unbearable. Sound recordists said it was the most stressful work of their careers because the goal wasn't just to capture clean audio, it was to capture nothing. And in those space sequences, that nothing, that emptiness, it became its own kind of sound. The absence of noise created tension. It made space feel truly alien, truly empty. And it only existed because Kubrick was willing to make his crew's lives miserable in pursuit of perfect silence. Number 15. The spacesuits worn by the astronauts cost more than some entire films. Each one was custom-built by an actual aerospace company, designed to look functional rather than theatrical. They weren't comfortable. They were heavy, restrictive, with limited visibility and no ventilation. The actors couldn't sit in them, couldn't bend properly, could barely walk. Bathroom breaks required 30 minutes of assistance. And the helmets, those iconic bubble helmets, they fogged constantly under the studio lights. The actors couldn't see, couldn't hear, could barely breathe. Between takes, they'd collapse on the floor, still in costume, gasping for air while crew members tried to cool them with fans. Kubrick showed no sympathy. He wanted the performances to reflect the reality of space travel, the claustrophobia, the isolation, the physical struggle. So when you watch those scenes and see the astronauts moving slowly, carefully, with visible effort, that's not acting. That's real discomfort captured on camera. The suits became prisons, and the actors became prisoners, and Kubrick filmed their suffering with cold precision. Number 16. Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick started as collaborators, but ended as something more complicated. They wrote the screenplay together, developed the ideas together, spent years in constant communication, but their visions diverged. Clarke wanted explanations, clear science, understandable aliens. Kubrick wanted mystery, ambiguity, questions without answers. As filming progressed, they argued more frequently. Clarke would write detailed backstories for the aliens, explain the monolith's purpose, outline the Star Child's future. Kubrick would ignore all of it. He'd take Clarke's ideas and strip them down to visual symbols, removing context, removing clarity. Clarke was frustrated but powerless. He was a writer, not a filmmaker, and Kubrick had final cut. So, Clarke did the only thing he could. He wrote a novel, expanding the story, explaining everything Kubrick deliberately left vague. The book and film were released simultaneously, telling the same story in completely different ways. One provided answers, the other refused them, and audiences got to choose which version they preferred. It was a strange partnership, two brilliant minds creating two versions of the same vision, neither one willing to compromise. Number 17. When NASA sent astronauts to the moon in 1969, they brought something unexpected with them, inspiration from Kubrick's film. Multiple Apollo astronauts later admitted they'd watched 2001 during training, studying the spacecraft designs, the movement in zero gravity, the calm professionalism of the astronauts. They said the film helped them mentally prepare for space in ways technical manuals couldn't. Some of the mission control procedures were even influenced by how Kubrick depicted space operations in the film. The calm radio communications, the systematic problem solving, the understated approach to crisis management. Art had influenced reality. Kubrick's obsessive research and scientific accuracy had created something so convincing that actual space travelers used it as a reference point. And then something even stranger happened. When audiences watched the real moon landing, many thought it looked fake because it didn't match the polished, perfect imagery from 2001. Kubrick's film had looked more real than reality itself. That's when conspiracy theories started, with some people claiming Kubrick had faked the moon landing because he had made space look so good on film. It was absurd, but it showed how completely Kubrick had defined what space was supposed to look like in the public imagination. Number 18. The film had no traditional plot structure, no clear protagonist for most of its runtime, no explanation for key events. Studio executives begged Kubrick to add narration. They wanted a voiceover explaining the monolith, describing the aliens' intentions, guiding audiences through the confusion. They even hired a narrator and recorded a full explanatory track. Kubrick listened to it, nodded, and then locked it in a vault where it stayed for decades. He never used a single word. Instead, he cut 20 minutes from the film after the premiere, tightening scenes, removing small explanations, making it even more opaque. The studio was horrified. You're supposed to add clarity, not remove it. But Kubrick understood something they didn't. The confusion was the experience. The mystery was the point. He wanted people to leave the theater arguing, discussing, theorizing. And they did. The film became a phenomenon precisely because it refused to explain itself. It demanded engagement, interpretation, repeated viewings. And that narration, that clear explanation the studio desperately wanted, it would have killed everything that made the film special. Number 19. Gary Lockwood and Keir Dullea spent most of the film in isolation, shooting alone on the spacecraft set for weeks at a time. No other cast members, minimal crew, just them and Kubrick's voice over the intercom. The experience was psychologically taxing. They started having strange dreams about space, about being trapped, about machines taking control. Lockwood said he'd wake up thinking he was still on the Discovery, that the spacecraft set had become more real than his actual apartment. The two actors developed an intense bond, relying on each other to stay sane during the long, repetitive shoots. They'd run lines between takes, discuss the meaning of scenes Kubrick wouldn't explain, try to find emotional truth in a film deliberately designed to be emotionless. And their isolation wasn't just psychological. Kubrick kept them away from the rest of the production, afraid that outside influence would contaminate their performances. He wanted them to feel like real astronauts, alone in the void, with only each other for company. And by the end of filming, that's exactly what they'd become. Number 20. The final shot of the film, the star child floating in space above Earth, is one of cinema's most iconic images. But creating it was a nightmare. The effect required multiple exposures, combining a model of Earth, star fields, and the fetus floating in its translucent sphere. Each element had to be photographed separately, then composited together using optical printing techniques. The slightest miscalculation would ruin everything. The effects team spent 6 weeks on that single shot, running test after test, adjusting exposures by fractions of a second. And when they finally got it right, Kubrick wasn't satisfied. He wanted the star child's eyes to glow, to show intelligence, to suggest transformation. So they started over. They added light sources inside the model, painted the eyes with reflective material, shot it again. Finally, after months of work, Kubrick approved it. One shot, seconds of screen time, months of labor, but it was worth it because that image, that haunting final vision, has endured for over 50 years. It's been copied, parodied, referenced countless times. And it all came from Kubrick's refusal to settle for good enough. Bonus fact. After 2001 became a cultural phenomenon, Kubrick received thousands of letters asking him to explain the ending. He never answered a single one. Instead, he kept them in boxes in his office, occasionally reading through them, fascinated by the interpretations people created. Some letters were scholarly, filled with philosophical analysis. Others were angry, demanding answers. Some were just confused. But Kubrick treasured them all because they proved his film had worked. It had created genuine mystery, genuine wonder, genuine engagement. Years later, a journalist asked him if he'd ever regret not explaining the film. Kubrick smiled and said, "The best art is the art that makes you think, not the art that thinks for you." And with that, He walked away, leaving the mystery intact. Because 2001, A Space Odyssey wasn't just a film about space, about aliens, about evolution. It was a film about the questions we can't answer, the mysteries we can't solve, the infinite we can't comprehend. And Kubrick knew that some things are better left unexplained.